This is in loving memory of my children, Sharon and David. You are the light that still guides me. Love never dies, it only transforms. Welcome to Gloria, the Story of a Woman, Chapter 5. As we left off last week, I was getting ready to go and live with my grandmother and granddad again. I had just finished the 4th grade of school, which I told you, I'd really acclimated to school. I had fallen in love with it. It was such a wonderful experience. There was plays that I was in. We had so many things that went on at school that were so enjoyable to me and that I was able to express myself. I loved my teachers, but things were such that I was going to go after the end of 4th grade in that summer, and I was going to live with my grandparents again. Of course, in the beginning, I was extremely happy because I remember the time before that I had lived there. However, it was very, very different for me. It was almost like cultural shock. I, of course, was going into the 5th grade, which meant that I was getting older. I had begun to mature a little bit. The world had opened up to me. I had seen more of the world. In the very beginning, I was only there and knew that circle of my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncle, my aunt, and that was all that I knew. And of course, the love that they showed me. So in the beginning, I was extremely excited, but I was always excited to go and see my grandparents. But to live there became a whole different story. I was a completely A student. I never got anything, and as I said in my last video, I said that I still had my report cards from the 1st through the 4th grade with all A's, A pluses, never missed a day. I was always in school and loved it dearly. Okay, I go back down to South Georgia. No running water, no electricity. Once again, living in a very primitive time. My grandmother still cooked our food on an old wood stove where she had to light the stove, get it hot, and everything was made from scratch. She still milked the old cow to get butter and milk. And so walking into the 5th grade, I walked into a school that was way out in the country. It was full of children that lived in the country. They were country kids. They were not, where I had gone to school before, it was people whose parents were in service in the Air Force or worked on the Air Force, which seemed to be a little higher level, if you know what I'm trying to say. Not that the kids were better, but we had more. So to go back and walk into that life of much less was once again, it was traumatizing, very traumatizing. And me going through everything that I had gone through from the time I was born until the 5th grade, going into the 5th grade, I had learned to be a people pleaser. So when I get to this school, I thought, how can I fit in? How can I make them like me? I've got to make them like me. Because they looked at me very differently. Remember that. I was some city slicker that had come. I didn't grow up, there with them. And so they looked at me. They kind of looked down on me. And I said, well, what can I do? So I became the class clown, which is not my real personality at all, but I thought, okay, I was trying to be the chameleon that I had learned to be. What could I do to make these teachers and all these kids like me? What did I have to do? And then trying to acclimate back into the life of gathering stove wood when I got home from school, doing my homework by a kerosene lamp that I had to round up all the lamps and clean the globes because of the soot in there where they had burned at night. and bring in stove wood for my grandmother to get up the next morning and light the stove and cook me breakfast, to draw water, to bathe. There was no shower. There was no bathtub. There was an old galvanized wash tub. So I had to learn how to relive again in that time. And then, of course, I started to school in September. We always started right after Labor Day. And it got cold. And I'm telling you, it was cold. And we didn't have thermal underwear. And we didn't have these thick fur jackets. And I had to walk from my grandmother's house over to the highway, which is where my aunt lived. And my cousins, I would go over there. She'd have this roaring fire going in the mornings. And I would wait there for my cousins to finish getting dressed. And then we would walk a little distance to get to the school bus. So that was my routine. And it was a tough one. It was a tough one for me. However, that toughness made me tough. It made me endure. It gave me something that I had to pull from that I never even knew that I had deep down in my young body at that time. Once again, we didn't have school plays. I did not have little dresses made for me. I did not have the maypole that we twirled around, and we didn't have the Halloween deals. We had and I'll never forget this, and I won a prize. We had the 4-H club. Now, any of y'all that know about the 4-H club, it has to do with things on a farm. So we had a corn shucking contest, and I won the corn shucking contest. I was the fastest, and I shucked the most corn, and I won. Someone had made 2 little bookends that were white, painted white, and then they had the 4-H on them. And I won one of those. And I was so excited because I had done something. Another thing being there opened me up to was I started playing basketball. Now, I can remember this as well as anything. I remember walking out on the court, and the coach, the principal of the school was the coach, and he looked at me and he said, "Gloria, are you a forward or a guard?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I'd never even seen a basketball game. I never even heard the word the basketball. I just knew I wanted to do it because it was something to do. So I said guard. Well, from that, I became a guard. And it stuck with me. Now, this is at the time where we played half court. We did not play full court. So the guards only played half court. Well, the forwards did too, but you could only go half court. So I would guard the people on one end of the court, and then after the half, we would change, and I would guard the people on the other end. But it introduced me to basketball. And I'll never forget, I got these, my grandmother bought me my little white tennis shoes. They were Converse. And I loved those shoes. They were so white. And we had little yellow outfits, shorts and a shirt with the little green letters on them. And these are the things that I remember about that time from the 5th to the 8th grade of school. I remember recesses. Oh my gosh, we had these long recesses. We'd go out and we'd build forts way down in the back of the woods. We'd play softball. We just did all kinds of things. I remember one time, this guy, his name was Billy Ingram. And he was the fastest little kid you can ever imagine. When he ran like the wind. And one day we're playing chase. And I remember watching him. He was running. And these kids were chasing him. And of course, you know, they tag you, you're it. So he was running from them so that he would not be tagged in the chase. He turned around to look to see where they were, how close they were to him. He ran smack dab into an oak tree. Knocked himself out cold. This thing on his head popped out purple. I mean, immediately, like an egg. It was amazing. And he had we all went barefooted. You didn't wear you didn't wear shoes. Very seldom did we wear shoes in that school particularly, especially if it was summertime. Looked down, and he had knocked the toenail off of one of his big toes. He hit so hard. And then another time, had another I was always getting into some kind of mischief. As I said, I did these things in order to fit in. So you have to understand, my personality changed. I was that chameleon again. We go into the gym. We break into the gym. Well, we didn't break in. The door was open, but we slipped into the gym. We were not supposed to be in there. And they had this chair, which was just a plain old wood chair that had no legs on it. It had the back and the seat. Well, the guys in the gym found a rope, tied the rope to the back of the chair. We would sit in that chair, and the guys would sling us around the gym. Now, this was really not good for the gym floor. Little did we know, or little did we probably care. I don't know. The only thing I know is that we were having fun. Because we would sit in that chair, and the rest of us would hold the rope and swing us around, and we were having the grand old time of our lives, and until that door opened, and there stood the principal. Well, needless to say, back then, we got paddled. They did not spare the rod with us kids. So he lined us all up, and boy, did we ever get a paddling for doing that. And I think we did mess up the gym floor pretty good. I'm not sure, but these are the kinds of things that we did in that school, rather than going to plays and me getting upset because I was not picked as Tom Thumb's wife to be the bride because I was too big. So we instead tied a rope to a chair and slung it around and slung each one around. And then in the summer, I really worked in the fields. My uncle grew tobacco. And it was at that time that the tobacco in the summer would come to mature. And they would go into the fields, pick it, bring it up, and what we would do is we would string it up on these wood poles, and then they'd hang it up in it was a tall building, and they'd get up there and hang all of that tobacco up in there, and then they would light the fire underneath that barn, the tobacco barn, and smoke it, and then take it to auction and sell it. And I remember I would work and I would hand tobacco. And I was really good at that. I was very fast. And my uncle would pay me 50 cents a day. I'll never forget, man, at the end of the day, he was paying all the hands that were out there and everything. And he'd hand me 2 quarters or 50 cents or whatever. And I'm telling you, I thought I was rich. I had this little green wallet that looked like it was an alligator, which of course it was plastic and fake. But I remember the little coin part was just packed full of coins. And I'd sit there and count it and count it and count it. And I was so excited because I had earned money. That was my first time of earning money and being able to go buy me something for myself, because my grandmother couldn't afford anything. I remember we used to I'd get a box from my mother in Warner Robins, and she would send me clothes. But the clothes that she sent me were just not what they wore down there. I really did stand out, and I guess I did look kind of weird. I'm not sure, but I don't know. But once again, this was a time that, as I said, it was hard for me, even though I've got good memories of it. It was very difficult for me to endure that time, because I had been taken once again from a place that I had gotten used to, and I enjoyed school, even though living at home was extremely hard, and my mother was so involved with my little sister that to get away down there was good for me until I got there. And then it became difficult. But as I said, I've got good memories of that. And after that, I left. My grandmother got sick. My granddad was sick. My grandmother got to the point where she had cataracts and everything. She was really down and out. She wasn't doing well at all. And she just could not take care of me any longer and get me up and get me to school, even though, believe it or not, I helped her more at that time. I had a lot of responsibility to helping her, which I did. I carried out my responsibilities 100% because I knew that she couldn't do it. And of course, I love my grandmother dearly and my granddad too. And so I was there from the 5th grade all the way up until through the 7th grade. And after the 7th grade, then I left and had to go back to Warner Robins. And I remember that they put me on a Greyhound bus. And my aunt, and I can tell you today what I wore. I wore a brown skirt. I had saddle Oxford shoes on, which were black and white saddle Oxfords, a brown skirt with a blue sweater. But my aunt had rolled my hair in these little tiny rollers, and my hair was so kinky. I don't know. I looked weird. I really did look weird. But that's the time. See, that's what people did back then. And my aunt, she was so good to me. I really didn't think much about it. But then I landed back in Warner Robins, which I dreaded to go, absolutely dreaded to go. And once I got off that Greyhound bus, that was it. I stayed there until I graduated from high school. And not long after that, I had just gotten back in and gotten settled in when we got the call that my granddad had died. And that was really a shock to me because, once again, my grandfather, I loved him dearly. And he was sick, so he wasn't really active, so much. But my joy was I shaved him and gave him a little haircut. And he loved that. And so that was our little time together. That's the time that we shared together, was sitting on that old back porch and me shaving him. And he'd sit there with his eyes closed. And he really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed doing it because, as I said, it was something that we shared together. And those were the last memories that I have of him. And then, as I said, my grandmother, she was still alive, but she was very, very, she'd had a hard life, raised 10 kids, and just had a very hard life. And from then on, once I went back to Warner Robins, it was a whole different ball game then. And I was back there to stay until I graduated high school. And that, my friends, is going to be what Chapter 6 is all about, is me going back and how I really sunk my teeth into basketball. Because that saved me. It literally saved my life, getting me out of the house and everything. So that's what Chapter 6 will be about. So y'all come back now next week, remember. And also, another thing, you got to remember something else. I am getting ready to leave for Costa Rica on June the 10th, and all of my travels to Costa Rica for the month is going to be posted here on my YouTube channel. It's not going to be posted on Facebook or anything or Instagram, but it'll all be here on YouTube. So you guys do not want to miss that either, okay? And thank you for watching, and I love you guys. Bye-bye.